Before we start, I would just like to let you know that unfortunately we did a piece on Leopardstown winning the Wayward Lad and Shishkin's devastating return in the Desert Orchid, beating Greater by 10 lengths, but the file is corrupt and therefore we won't be able to show it in this video. Massive apologies, nothing we can do about it, and we didn't have time to re-record. But in summary, we do think that Leopardstown's jumping might let him down on the big stage, and Shishkin, well, Energamene's going to have to be seriously special to put up to him. He was brilliant and definitely leads the way in the Champion Chase division. So if you do enjoy this video, please hit that like button. It massively helps out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and also let us know your thoughts on the festive racing period. Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. What a brilliant festive period full of excellent racing that we're going to digest over the next half an hour or so. There's plenty to get through, so we won't waste any time. But first of all, before we do go into that, Andrew, did you have a good festival period?
Yeah, it was good. Great to be up, one of the very few up at Leopardstown. Luckily enough, I'm a member up there, so it was great to get to see some live racing, and based off what we saw up there, some potential stars and potential Cheltenham Festival winners in the midst of it all. So it was interesting overall, a steady enough couple of days punting wise as well. Ended up just on top over the 4 days. I've had a few dreadful Christmases before, so I was happy enough with how it went.
I didn't expect so much uptake on the giveaway in our last video. The incredible prizes on offer were to die for. We have picked a winner. We're going to go for Pierce Solly. You've won yourself an Ollie Murphy racing cap, a JP McManus coaster, and you can put them all in now what looks a very good stocking for next year. So if you can contact me over on Twitter, I'll get them out to you as soon as possible. But we've got so much action to get through, it's ridiculous. We'll start at Down Royal on Boxing Day, where we saw Jerry Colombe and O'Toole make their hurling debut in Division 1 and Division 2 of the maiden hurdle there. My initial thoughts on Jerry Colombe was I'm not sure he's mature enough for a Bartlett. I don't think he's good enough for a Ballymore, and I was probably thinking Martin Pipe with him if he was going to run at the festival. And then O'Toole, he was reasonably decent, satisfactory jumping, and I think Stuart Crawford said after that he's a potential Gold Cup horse down the line. He's massive, enormous, gorgeous horse, and chasing might be his game. So I think they might look after him this season. But what was your thoughts on how both of those went?
Yeah, look, the two of them were very good for both of them to win and kind of tick that box away for their first hurdling efforts, and both to go on and win. Jerry Colombe was good. Both of them were very strong at the line, which is good to see. Both of them real 3 mile chasers in the making, though. I would say the two of them will really be fairly looked after, maybe with an eye on the likes of a Fairy House Easter Festival this year rather than maybe Cheltenham targets, especially with O'Toole, given the connections. You know, you'd have to think, especially if they do think that he is a Gold Cup horse, that they don't want to overface this horse as a young horse. So it'll be interesting to see. Probably the next start for the two of them will depend on what will be then, you know, a case of whether they go over to Cheltenham or maybe stay in Ireland for Fairy House and Punchestown.
Yeah, you suspect one or both of them might turn up at the Dublin Racing Festival. That could be of interest, and we're going to have plenty of clues then as well. But we'll head over to the main action, I suppose, was at Kempton on Boxing Day, where Brave Man's Game went up against Ahoy Signor and firmly put that argument to bed. He was much superior to him, and Nichols, I think afterwards he said that he wanted to skip Cheltenham in his ideal world, but the owners are keen to go there. You'd imagine the only race that he would run in would be the 3 mile novice chase. Also put a lot of emphasis on the 2022 King George, whether that's the main aim. And we'll get on to a certain Galopin des Champs later on. I think on Boxing Day Nichols was maybe coming round to the idea of running at Cheltenham. Maybe not so much anymore. But what did you think of his performance? Or what do you think of Ahoy Signor? Were you disappointed by him?
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. His jumping didn't really stand the test of time around Kempton. Maybe they were going a stride quicker than he would have wanted to, but he was indifferent at a lot of his fences, and Brave Man's Game just looked a more mature, more classy operator around that sort of track, and it doesn't surprise me at all that the long-term aim is next year's King George. He looks absolutely tailor-made for it. In terms of Cheltenham, I've always had his doubts about maybe staying the 3 mile race, so I can see where there's potential reservations. That being said, you do want the good English horses running against the good Irish horses, and especially with the bad news over Christmas with My Drogo not being around for the end of the season. I just don't want to get to a stage where the likes of Bob Olinger and perhaps a Galopin Des Champs get somewhat freebies in their respective races. You want to see the challengers come up against them, and Brave Man's Game would be certainly a viable contender. Whether you think he would beat Galopin Des Champs or not is probably up to individual thoughts, but you'd like to see them have that clash anyway.
He is a super jumper, and I think many of the Ahoy Senior supporters afterwards said that Kempton didn't suit him, and that might be the case. However, this might be unpopular. I would back Brave Man's Game to confirm that form over 3 miles, over fences at any course in the country. I just think he's the better horse, the better 3-miler, and the far better jumper as well. With regards to Cheltenham, my gut feeling is telling me that he won't run, which will be a shame. You suspect Galopin Des Champs could come up against, a bit like Monkfish last year, 4 or 5 inferior horses, and it could be a bit of a freebie, like you say. That would be disappointing. We do want to see the good horses take each other on. A Brave Man's Game versus Galopin Des Champs would be very mouth-watering, although Galopin Des Champs was so impressive. We'll get onto that later. Epatante won the Christmas hurdle, and she was much better than she was in the Fighting Fifth. I don't think she had to come on a heck of a lot, and immediately after I probably thought that she won't be beating Honeysuckle unless Honeysuckle was to bomb out for whatever reason. I'm not sure she wants to step up and trip to 2.5 either. I think she's in a real tricky situation where she's not good enough to beat the standout 2-miler. What did you make of her win?
Yeah, look, it was good to see her win, and she was the class horse of that race. I just saw a fair few people jumping up and down about her. I thought turning in that she was going to win by 10 lengths. She took it up kind of from Not So Sleepy turning in, and you think, Jesus, she's travelling hard on the steel here. She's going to go and absolutely romp in. And to be honest, I thought it was a bit of a... She kind of fell in really by a couple of lengths. You have a horse like Glory and Fortune making ground with the line. You know, that horse would have to start now in the Champion Hurdle to have a chance. So the form of the race, going into the race, it didn't look a strong race, but it still wasn't. You know, the likes of Glory and Fortune, Soaring Glory, they're no better than, you know, maybe listed Grade 3 horses. So yeah, I get what you mean. I don't think she wants 2.5 miles around Cheltenham, but you know, I think she'd be probably best, you know, over 2 miles if she's going to come third in a Champion Hurdle at best, maybe like last year. I don't see her beating Honeysuckle, and to be honest, I don't see her beating Charger.
What is interesting is Nicky said before Kempton that no matter what happens, they might try 2.5 miles before Cheltenham. Be interesting to see where they do that, because I'm not sure there's plenty of opportunities. Tornado Flyer, you put in a good word for him in the King George. He was successful. Plenty of disappointments in the race. Minella Rindo ran no sort of race. Chantry House was backed into favourite on the day. He ran no race. Frodon was disappointing. Clanderzobo ran maybe to form, but even Tornado Flyer beat him convincingly. What did you make of the King George? And if Asterion Forlange had stayed on his feet, I don't want to mention it too much, do you think he could have got to Tornado Flyer, or do you think it was just over?
Yeah, well, I'm obviously one of Forlange's biggest fans out there, but I didn't think he was getting to Tornado Flyer at all. I thought Danny Mullins was steadying into the last and had a bit more up the sleeve. Forlange didn't deserve to come down, obviously, and he jumped really very well again. It was just a soft fall at the last. Unfortunately, it's becoming too much of a common theme with that horse, but he is very good. The rest of it very hard to kind of put your head round it. Like I knew going into the race that the likes of Kempton mightn't suit Chantry House and mightn't suit Manel Indo, but I thought they'd still run well, and they'd run maybe and finish third, or maybe run the way Clan des Obeaux ran, and you kind of go, well, actually, you know, you'd be pretty happy with that. But Chantry House was never travelling, and Manella Indo, I don't know whether he didn't take to the cheek pieces being on. He was given a slightly strange ride. He was going up to jostle with Frodon a lot. They probably cut each other's throats, but even then he's been beaten far too far out, and Henry de Bromhead's come back and said he was shook after the race. Now I think he's probably a price at the moment for the Gold Cup, because not that it happened quite to this extent last year, but he was fairly average this time last year, and everyone kind of went, oh, he's got no chance. And then it comes to March, with the way things are going now, Davy Russell's on Galvin. I've even had to concede Delta Works just not at the races anymore, and Rachel rides at Plutar. Leaves one man to be back on Manella Indo, and he could be the magic man, and that's Jack Kennedy.
I think you've got a bit more faith with him. He doesn't look the same horse as he did last year. He might be a big price for the Gold Cup even on the day. I think I'd let him win. I don't trust him as much as you seem to. Over at Leopardstown, some good young horses on show, none more so than Sir Gerhard, who made his hurdling debut in the 2 mile maiden hurdle. He's now 5-1 for the Supreme Novices hurdle. He travelled well, he jumped well.
You couldn't have been more impressed with his hurdling debut. I know some people were out with the stopwatches saying that it wasn't a great time and all that. He was making his own running, he was dictating the race from the front, and some decent enough horses in behind him. Like, I don't know what more people wanted to see. He jumped impeccably, he quickened up nicely, and he kind of set the tone really for what was a destructive week for Willie Mullins at Leopardstown and across the cards. I think he's a super horse. I loved him last year. I didn't think he ran to par at Punchestown personally. Maybe that was the effects at Cheltenham. I think I just don't think he was quite at it when he finished third behind Kilcrut and O'Toole, and I thought that was a really nice taking performance, and I suspect he's at the moment the number one for Mullins in the novice hurdle ranks, especially at that 2 mile division, and I think he's got a very good chance of going very close.
You know what? Looking at the Supreme Novices hurdle, you've got John Bon, you've got Sir Gerhard, and you've got Constitution Hill as 3 main standouts. I would have him second on my list out of the 3 of those. I think I'd have John Bon first, Sir Gerhard second, and Constitution Hill third at this time. Obviously Constitution Hill's going to run in the Tolworth, but I really liked what I saw from Sir Gerhard. It's going to be interesting because it looks to me like Sir Gerhard needs to go forward in a race like that. You suspect he'll do that at Cheltenham, and that could just tee it up perfectly for John Bon, or might work up the opposite, and John Bon's kind of had it his own way on his first 2 starts. He might not like having a horse in front of him. It's fascinating. Let's take out John Bon's last run, and I know that's difficult to do, but let's just say Constitution Hill, Sir Gerhard and John Bon, their 3 debuts. If they were all priced after that debut at 5-1 for the Supreme Novices hurdle, which one do you think you'd back?
I think I would back Sir Gerhard actually out of those 3, and I know I've been very, very keen on John Bon, just based off the fact, obviously you were saying of the first runs, and John Bon's first run he was beaten Good Risk at All, who's a horse that everyone else seems to like. I don't really like at all. And Sir Gerhard, just the way he did it in a very professional manner. I was watching him quite keenly in the parade ring beforehand as well. Such a relaxed horse, gets the job done. He seems to be very easy, during his races, kind of jumps when you need him to jump, like as a bumper horse. When you needed him to go, he would find. And also he has that form from last year's champion Bumper, which is probably the thing that would maybe just slightly edge it for me over those 2 Henderson horses. We don't know how they would act around Cheltenham.
Another impressive youngster was Phil Dorr, who won a Grade 1. He's now got Grade 1 by his name, and he was definitely better on softer ground. I don't think he's a superstar, and I'm not 100% sure about Luna Power either. And if you're judging Phil Dorr solely on the ability of Luna Power and what he's beating, if Luna Power was to be fairly average, is he showing much? I know we've got Vauban, who's going to be out today when we're uploading this video. I'm hoping that he's something good.
Yeah, I thought he was good. Look, he wants softer ground, he jumps quite nicely, and he does kind of what you need him to do. Again, he's an absolute dude of a horse. Like in the parade ring, usually you get jockeys having to get a leg up from trainers. It was absolutely fascinating watching Davy Russell get up on Phil Dorr. Phil Dorr just stood still. Nobody went close to him, and Davy Russell was able to just get up on him by himself. I've actually never seen that happen before. Like, he is the most relaxed, kind of couldn't give a toss horse I've ever seen. Like, you got to pats around. But when you need him, he's there. He's doing what he needs to do, and I think it's probably a horse that you wouldn't know how much is in the tank. There mightn't be that much, there might be loads more, but we're kind of not seeing it one way or the other. I do get what your point, that he's probably not beating superstars here, but like the English juvenile form, maybe bar the Skelton horse, looks absolutely dross. And there hasn't been that much else in Ireland that's looked that great. A Allen looked okay at Leopardstown. Maybe we'll get a Vauban or a Pied Piper, a Springer out of there. But at the moment, Phil Dorr is, to be fair, still the clear standard bearer, and something is going to have to come out and beat him, because he does set a very solid standard of form.
Look, if something doesn't come out of the woodwork, then Phil Dorr definitely leads the way. I don't think it would take a real superstar to put it up to him or be a threat.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying, and sometimes you get that. Sometimes you mightn't see the Triumph Hurdle winner until February time or something. You know, you get a horse that comes out like Burning Victory, who only made her debut over hurdles in the kind of the last week of February at Fairyhouse, and those horses can happen. And I get what you mean in terms of he looks like something could beat him, but at the moment, it just doesn't seem a very inspiring division for my eyes.
If it was to be good to soft, then I think he would be definitely vulnerable to some quicker horses. Ferny Hollow was very impressive when beating Riviere de Tel, giving her £13. He jumped well. He looked like he had a hard enough race, but was super impressive and definitely deserves to be Arkle favourite now. I think that's the best 2 mile novice chase form we've seen this season. I was very impressed, and I'm sure you were as well.
Yeah, no, he was very good. His jumping was super. The mare was probably a little bit better than I gave her credit for as well. I thought she ran a very good race, obviously getting the allowances. And as you say, he's a well-worthy favourite for the Arkle. I think he'd take a heap of beating in the Arkle. I know it's going to sound controversial, I just don't subscribe to this feeling though that he's just a complete superstar. I don't know, I've seen that race at Christmas before. I've seen Min demolish rivals, I've seen Duvan demolish rivals, and it was just a little bit workmanlike for my eyes. People have it in their head that he's just absolutely world class, and if we're going to think long term about 2023, say, you know, fingers crossed everyone's there sound, I don't see him beating Shishkin. I don't see him beating an Ergamine. I don't know why. Maybe it's because he wants maybe a little bit further in time. You know, he doesn't, I think, and they've said that a couple of times, that he doesn't, you know, he could easily go out and trip, and he could be an absolute monster if you suddenly stepped him up to 3 miles. He could be like a Vautour in the King George and go around motoring, and that might be where we see his best. But I think there will come a time, not this year maybe, but in time over 2 miles, where that horse might be vulnerable.
I reckon he's a really good 2.5 miler that's just mopping up in a very weak 2 mile division. Willie Mullins, before the season in his stables tour, emphasised Ferny Hollow's got so much stamina. I think even then he was telling you that Appreciate It was going to be the Arkle horse and Ferny Hollow would step up and trip. Now Appreciate It's obviously out for the season, or out until the spring anyway. I think Ferny Hollow has filled that void, and he's been reasonably impressive. Like beating Course Sublime, he wasn't 100% convincing that day, but I still think at the moment he does lead the way. Facile Vega talked to me, that the talking horse out of those 4 bumper winners for Willie Mullins going into it, and you messaged me straight after and said, Josh, this is a machine. Yeah, he is a machine. An absolute machine. And I don't like kind of falling into the hype and all of that, but it was hard not to. Because the one good thing about being up in Leopardstown with nobody else around was you heard everything. You could speak to the bookies, you could pretty much speak to the trainers. And I heard word for pretty much every horse in that bumper, because obviously Willie's was well thought about. Emmett Mullins' horse was backed off the board. They thought a heap of that, so Scottish. I know the Nolans quite like their horse, Joyeux Machan. He ran a good race in second. Henry de Bromhead at a point-to-point winner, very well fancied. And this horse has tossed them away. And they went a good clip all the way. And turning in, you've got Rob James, to be fair to him, riding up on the outside on Joyeux Machan to try and get Patrick off the bridle. And he did, but then the horse scooted clear. And I'm there going, Christ, because when you've got one of those bumpers in Ireland where there's so much word, you can usually guarantee it's a pretty strong heat, and he made pretty light work of it. And I thought of all 4, he was the most impressive, obviously. Yeah, he was a different type to the rest of them. He's definitely a big galloping horse, and he always reminds me slightly of Appreciate It. Big horse, maybe more mature, that needs a trip in time potentially. But he didn't lack speed, and he did look very smart. I still think at this stage I prefer American Mike, but I'm not sure it would take much convincing if Facile Vega was to come out in the Dublin Racing Festival and be equally as impressive. I'd have to sit on the fence between those two, really. I'm interested. I think there's some good horses out there in Ireland. There doesn't seem to be too many bumper horses coming out of the clouds in England, I must say, maybe, because I just don't see the likes of a Henry II going down a champion bumper route in any way.
But American Mike you've got in there. I'm still hoping, fingers crossed, we might see Xander Clegane up in class next time out. Like, that form looks pretty strong, I think. And I think it's interesting that the Nolans have pitched the other horse in with Facile Vega to try maybe get a little bit of a line on the form. So he's in it because I think he's 12-14 to 1 for the bumper. But it's fascinating, and it's great to see so many good young horses that you're thinking of it almost having headaches about the champion bumper. It's all the problems I want to have.
The only issue is, like you mentioned, none of them are British trained. Okay, let's move on. Limerick, Master McShee won the Grade 1 Faheen Novices Chase, and I must say the race turned out to be quite disappointing because Lifetime Ambition and Vanilla were both non-runners. Vanilla stepped up in trip and Lifetime Ambition wasn't to be seen. I think he's going to go against Bob Ollinger in the Punchestown Grade 3. That looks like it's going to be his next step. But Master McShee, you loved him last year and you thought that form behind Appreciate It in the novice hurdles was very strong, and it's clearly turned out to be because he's won a Grade 1 over fences. Do you think the race was that good, and can we take much from it going forward, or do you think that was Master McShee's day in the sun?
I think there might have been an element to the fact that it was his day in the sun, but I wouldn't give up on this horse again. I can almost guarantee the next race you'd run him in is the Flogas at the Dublin Racing Festival over 2-5, and look, he's going to run against Galopin Des Champs in that, maybe Haute en Couleur, a couple of other really good horses, and we'll see how good he is then. But it was only his second start over fences. He jumped impeccably, and I know Ian Power said in the interview afterwards that he thought he would come on for the run. Now, if he was to come on again, he might be in the mix in that Grade 1. You have to think he'd be maybe short the mark of some of the really top horses, but it's great to see, and I think over the entire week it was probably the most heartwarming win. Paddy Corkery has known more than 2 or 3 horses at a time, and for him to trust this horse, he could have easily sold it last year after winning his maiden hurdle. I'm sure he had plenty of suitors for the horse. He kept on to it thinking this was his only time that he was going to have a potential Grade 1 horse, and I love seeing those sort of things vindicated.
Let's move on to the 27th then, and we'll stick with Leopardstown. We'll stick with Haute en Couleur, the horse that you mentioned there. He jumped well, he looked smart. I would have slight concerns about form. I don't think Mount Leinster's up to much, and Gentleman to Me was very disappointing in the handicap hurdles last year at the spring festivals. I do think that he's got to improve to get to Fernie, definitely. But could he step up in trip?
Yeah, well, that's seemingly what Willie Mullins was angling at, and probably to keep them away from each other. He might be a horse that ends up running in the Marsh against Bob Ollinger, or I think it's now the Turners, not the Marsh, but he might be the one that's almost sacrificed to go up against him. He was good, as you say. I'd have loved to have seen the Devil's Coachman running that race, because he brought the Fernie Hollow form. He was a late known runner, but I thought he was as good as you could probably expect from a horse making his beginner's chase debut around Leopardstown. And like, the 2 horses he beat aren't world beaters, but they're fair enough standard bearers, so he was decent enough.
One horse that I think I can't get a grip on at the moment is Envoi Allen. Before the festive period, if you told me that he'd won this race, I'd have been very shocked, because I thought he'd have to beat Chaka Boursois to do so. However, Chaka Boursois didn't turn up, and he was lame that morning, so that meant that Envoi Allen had to beat Battle Over Doyen and Sizing Potsy over 2 miles. And look, Battle Over Doyen in the past, we've both said he'd probably be more suited to 4 miles than he would 2. He's a big old boat. To me, travelled the better out the 2. Envoi Allen was off the bit earlier. Being there, what did you make of that?
Yeah, it was fairly hollow around the place, really. It wasn't what anyone wanted to see. They were finishing fairly legless. I think probably the only thing, in terms of trying to not big up the horse, but I think Henry, under his own admission, would say that his horses weren't running at A1 level throughout the entirety of the week. He had plenty of horses travel into their races and then not find or get beaten or run quite listless. So any horse from his yard that won this week probably has to be upgraded slightly. But that being said, it was like you felt before the race, like it had got the wind blown out of its sails with Shakan not running. So you're looking at these 3 runners and going, well, this is no more a 2 mile grade 1. Like if you told me 2 years ago or something like that we'd have a 2 mile grade 1 around Leopardstown, it'd be Envoy Lane, Battle Over Doyen and Sizing Potsy, you'd say give over. So it wasn't one of the great spectacles of the week, that's for sure. Look, it's good to see him winning, but you can't help but think he's still not quite right.
Battle Over Doyen, each way squeak in the champion chase?
Yeah, well, if he starts maybe in a week's time, he might get to the final fence with Shishkin, but yeah, no, not for me anyway.
Let's then talk about Mighty Potter, who won the Grade 1 2 mile novice hurdle. I did think that Three Stripe Life was bitterly unlucky and far out finished well. I think he might go down a Martin Pipe route later on in the season, but Mighty Potter, lots of people loved him going into the race, and he duly obliged.
He was good, helped by a better gallop this time round, jumped quite nicely. Maybe it's bias, maybe because I backed him and I've backed him for the Supreme. I thought, Three Stripe Life had such a rotten trip. He made a mistake at the wrong time. He actually had jumped quite nicely, bungled 2 out. Then he had to kind of come round all these horses and ended up finishing with running in him. So I'd be interested in the 2 of them. I don't see any reason why the 2 of them won't run against each other again in the 2 mile novice hurdle, the Grade 1 at the Dublin Racing Festival, and you might throw in a Sir Gerhard, and that'll be a really interesting race, because I don't know how all of that matches up against each other at the moment. I thought actually Grangie ran a very good race, considering she's a Mares Novice Hurdle candidate. It won't be as strong, and I think one of my friends is actually a part owner of Grangie, and he said in the parade ring afterwards that Paul Townend thought he'd maybe got there a little bit too soon, and with a little bit more restraint she might have gotten a little closer. So I think she's got a very good chance in the Mares Novice, but I think the first 2 are good, I just don't know how good.
Limerick, I'm going to quickly give a mention to Glens of Antrim, who got off the mark finally over hurdles.
Glens of Antrim is becoming this year's 3rd time lucky in terms of mentions on this podcast. We can't go a week without Glens of Antrim updates. She's won at 1 to 5 around Limerick.
I put her up at 25 to 1, 32 to 1, I'm not sure what price, for the Mares Novice Hurdle. And we're going to keep updated throughout the season on the progress of Glens of Antrim, because I think she's got a good chance. I liked what I saw. She doesn't have a profile that's a million miles away from Concertista at that time before she went on to win the Mares Novice Hurdle at the Cheltenham Festival. So you can stick your head in your hands up your arse. This
is actually exactly the opposite from last year, because I was all over her last year and you're there, oh, she's no chance. And now it's the complete opposite way around. You've got to give up the ghost. I've never seen somebody so excited about a horse finishing 11th at Fairyhouse.
Wins. If I'm going to be completely honest, I do think that Brandy Love was more impressive in her maiden hurdle and whatnot, and there's a few ahead of her, but I do think she's got a good chance, and it looks like they're going to go that route. The 28th at Leopardstown, Classical Dream beat Flooring Porter in a controversial start when he kind of nicked 6 lengths on them, kind of jolted at the start and got a run at things. Flooring Porter would have ideally been out in front, and Willie Mullins said that Classical Dream, the plan was never to go forward. He got the job done in the end. I think Paul Townend was very good at letting him just settle and go into his own rhythm. That being said, as a big champ fan in the Stayers Hurdle, the one horse out of that race that I'm most fearing is Flooring Porter. He's gone well up in my estimations. I thought he ran very, very credibly, and I would probably back Flooring Porter to reverse that form with Classical Dream at Cheltenham. I'm hoping neither of them are good enough to beat Champ, but I did think it was a good race. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I thought it was a great race, one of my favourites of the entire week. The 2 of them got at it a long way from home. It's very hard to know what to say about the start. It seemed to be such a close call between obviously the tapes going up, the horse bolting. It was I'm not sure really what you can do. It just seemed to be one of those sort of situations. I think Flooring Porter came out with an awful lot of credit as a result, but the winner's good as well, and he's only ran over 3 miles twice now, and he's won twice. I don't think I saw some of the most bizarre takes of the entire week of this race. I saw people on Twitter saying that the horses in behind weren't trying. Now, I don't know at Grade 1 level why on earth you'd be a non-jigger, but these horses just couldn't go with the gallop. The likes of Grand Bois, Abacadabras, they just couldn't go it. and the two of them were far and best superior. And when you add those two to Champ, Time Hill, it becomes not a bad little race if all of them can get there fit and well.
I firmly think that the only two horses that could win a Stayers Hurdle after that race would be Classical Dream and Flooring Porter. I don't think any of those are behind, those non-triers. Galvin won the Savills Chase, beating A Plus Tard. It was a good run. The extra 2 furlongs to the Gold Cup's going to be right up his street. He is a dour stayer, and I thought David Russell gave him a peach of a ride. That being said, I didn't think A Plus Tard was his very best. What was your feeling on course?
Egg on my face, really, because I said Galvin couldn't win a Grade 1, so got that completely wrong. I thought Davey gave him an unbelievable ride, as you say. Don't think A Plus Tard was obviously at his best. I don't think Henry's were at their best, so I think you can mark that performance up. I think he's clearly still the best horse in the race. He'd be, of that race, he'd be the horse obviously you'd take forward to the Gold Cup. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I just don't see Galvin winning a Gold Cup. I see your angle. I could see him running well because he's better than I thought he would be, and I've admitted that, but just don't really see him winning one.
At this stage, he'd be my pick. I'll be honest, I didn't think he'd win the Savills Chase, and I thought he'd run well, but would be seen to best effect at Cheltenham. The fact that he's won the Savills Chase has filled me with a bit more confidence. If he runs to that level, and the extra 2 furlongs are only going to help, he's won at Cheltenham before. That race doesn't look awful now as well. I think you need to give him a bit more credit than you currently are.
I'm trying to give him credit because I do genuinely think he's been very good and his performance was excellent. And you're right in terms of that. I want to get your view on one in a completely unbiased view. Forget I'm the one asking the question, but given I came out of the Christmas period with the Gold Cup with a lot more questions than answers. A lot of horses blotted their copybook. You thought A Plus Tard would win, he didn't. Manel Indo ran very badly. Chantry House ran very badly. What's going to happen in 2 days' time if we're sitting here, though, at Tramore? I see Willie Mullins has put in 4 yardsticks, which I think is interesting, that they're trying to get this horse more fit by giving him a proper race. So they've got Animix in there, Brahma Bulls in there, Acapella Bourgeois in there. But if ABP goes and wins at Tramore, what price does he become? Because everyone will latch on to the fact that he's actually still the solid option.
Right now, the 3 horses who could win the Gold Cup in my eyes are Galvin, A Plus Tard and Alboon Photo. I will completely admit that. After the weekend, I thought, look, those runners in the King George, it was too bad to be true. Manella Indo probably will go straight to the Gold Cup. He might run at the Dublin Racing Festival. It's unlikely. Chantry House, I'm not sure whether they're going to run him. And you're scratching around to think that Clandezobo, who won't run in the race, and Frodon's not going to step up. Tornado Flyer, I think, probably Ryanair for him. That division, from it looked really strong, now looks really, really weak, and it does slightly dampen my enthusiasm for Champ. I could just see them trying the Denman Chase and pray to the Lord that they don't. Please stick to hurdles, please stick to hurdles. But yeah, the 3 horses, A Plus Tard, Galvin and Alboon Photo, and you suspect that he'll win that race at Tramore, as he does every year, and he will be a decent shout, and he is a solid shout for the Gold Cup, I'll completely admit that. Galopin Deschamps, potentially a future Gold Cup winner. He was so impressive, and just before we came on, you said it was probably the best beginner's chase performance you've ever seen at Leopardstown.
Yeah, now that's obviously a limited sample size in comparison to plenty, but I've been up there for the last 8-9 years, I'd say, and he was electric. He just made lengths and lengths at his fences. He went down to the first fence in line with 2 other horses. He came out 2.5 lengths ahead. They weren't mugs either, like Fleur, Blue Sari. These are not bad horses. And he blew them away. And it took Paul Townend nearly to get to the back straight before pulling him up, which was quite outrageous, really. Like, he could have definitely gone round again. I certainly would prefer to be holding the 25-1 ticket than looking at you smugly holding your 25-1 ticket. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, this is priceless now. You mentioned it before when he's a potential Gold Cup horse, that this is going to be priceless. I'm going to try my very best to get Paul Townend and Willie Mullins to sign this before sending it off. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try. Yeah, God, what a performance. And he's now 7-4 for the 3 mile novice chase at Cheltenham. You suspect if Braveman's Game doesn't turn up, it could be a bit of a freebie, but you would like to see that happen. He was so impressive, jumped impeccably, galloped through the line. Willie Mullins was, I think, a bit startled about the performance. I don't think even he expected it to be that good. I knew he thought it was a good horse, and he's done everything right for a chasing debut. You suspect he'll go back to the Dublin Racing Festival for the Flow Gas, the 2.5-2.6 race, and he's going to take quite a bit of stopping in that. You suspect he could just do the exact same thing to a slightly better field. 25-1, come on! I'm trying not to get too carried away because I know things can happen, and I know all it takes is a flick on the phone a week before Cheltenham and suddenly he's out, and that's all it takes. I know that you were unfortunately too used to that before last year's festival, and that cannot happen in this case. He's got to get there safe, and hopefully he wins. But he's got Cheltenham form as well. Oh, bulletproof. What a horse. Limerick, Concertista proved that she stayed. She won the 2 mile 6 mare's chase there. She's mare's chase bound. Willie Mullins has said that, and I think she's going to have one run in between. But she jumps. She's a very accurate jumper. She doesn't go overly big over her fences, and that would be a slight concern. Maybe if they got racing early at Cheltenham, you wouldn't have full confidence that she'd jump particularly well, and you wouldn't want her to go through a fence. But very happy with that. She's into 11-4 for the mare's chase, and I do think she sets the standard. Let's then move on to the 29th at Leopardstown, and Journey With Me beat Manila Crooner in the 2.5 mile maiden hurdle. And to be fair, I do think he's got more pace than I did give him credit for before, especially in the season previews. I was quite critical of him, and I thought that 3 miles would be his game. I still agree. Grade 1 novice chaser over 3 miles. God, he's massive. He's going to be seriously exciting next season over a fence. In the meantime, I do think the Ballymore is more likely, and I do think he'll run in that 2 mile 6 race at the Dublin Racing Festival, despite some people saying that Clonmel 3 mile race, the race that Minella Indo won before winning the Bartlett, could be next for him. I'm not 100% sure, and I don't think the owners are either. So I do think after that run at Leopardstown, the thing that would make sense for me, and it's better timing, would be the 2.6 race. It's 2 furlongs further. He didn't lack speed, and I think you get more of a gist, because if he was to win that, then you might go down the Ballymore route. Whether if it was to be beaten 2nd, 3rd or 4th, then you know that the Bartlett's probably his game. Were you impressed with him, and what did you make of Kilcroot?
Good performance. Again, probably a little bit better than I thought he would be, especially given the way Henry's ran all week. I think you can upgrade it. Kilcroot, I've a horrible feeling, I don't want to preempt fate here or anything like that. I just have a feeling that we're going to get a bulletin in a week or two's time that Kilcroot's going to be out for the season. I just don't think something's right. I know there was a video doing the rounds of him potentially taking a false step and kind of going wrong around the bend, and I just feel something's at him at the moment. He hasn't turned into a bad horse overnight, and I know sometimes you can be flattered by bumper performances, but like his bumper form is rightly tied in with Sir Gerhard, and Sir Gerhard still looks a beast, and Kilcroot now looks like he can't even win a maiden hurdle, so that's not him. I thought Manila Crooner ran a super race. He couldn't jump for peanuts, but he has some engine, so when he learns to jump, and maybe fences will bring out the best of him, he'll be a good horse. Yeah, Journey With Me, I think he's very good. I think it was a complete overreaction, him being favourite for the Ballymore, though. I think we've seen a fair few better horses out there so far, and he can still improve, and if he goes and wins at the Dublin Racing Festival, he'll be a worthy favourite. But I think there's 2 horses in Noel Moore and Silks that potentially have achieved a bit more.
Ginto, potentially.
Yeah, well, I think Ginto, I was a little bit snippy about him at the start of the year. The more and more I look at it, I think he's an absolute freak. He beat Eric Bloodaxe 11 lengths last time out at Navan, hard at the line. Eric Bloodaxe went out and won that good race down in Limerick, Grade 2 race, and he beat Mr. Fred Rogers 17.5 lengths. He's gone out and won a decent enough novice hurdle, beating a subsequent Grade 3 winner down at I think it was Thurles just before Christmas. I think he's a lot better than people have initially given him credit for.
He's massive. A 3 mile chaser, a bit like Journey With Me next year, most likely. Let's then get onto the mare's hurdle, and Royal Kahala beat Heaven Help Us, who beat Tell Me Something Girl. And I thought this was a brilliant run from Tell Me Something Girl, and it's definitely a work in progress, working back from the Cheltenham Festival. Henry de Bromhead has said that. Earlier on in the show, you said that Tell Me Something Girl, or Henry's horses in general, were running awfully, and anyone that ran well, you can give them slightly more credit for. Tell Me Something Girl had to give Royal Kahala £5 and Heaven Help Us £8 as well. It's going to take a very good case for you to convince me that Tell Me Something Girl won't reverse that form in the Mayor's Hurdle.
No, I get the case, and I get the point with, and I feel the only thing is that the people defending the case with Tell Me Something Girl are all these people that have backed her at very fancy prices, and the people that have backed her at fancy prices, she's a good chance. She's probably the right favourite for the race given the Mayor's Novice Hurdle form from last year. But I just know, Josh, that the wise guys are beginning to circulate. And there's just all this feeling about a horse that's been beaten twice this year. You've got a horse like Royal Kahala, who's finished twice ahead of her this year. A really good mare. She didn't run well at the Mayor's Novice Hurdle last season. And then you're going to say, oh, well, you can't forgive her for that Cheltenham Hurdle form. That was the reason we all took on Epatante in the 2020 Champion Hurdle. She didn't run well in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle, but she was bulletproof other than that. I think you can give Royal Kahala a little bit of an upgrade on that. But the one I just think is Heaven Help Us, because Heaven Help Us is more than double the price of Tell Me Something Girl, and I can completely make amends with Tell Me Something Girl being shorter in the market than Heaven Help Us. I get that, but she shouldn't be more than double the price, because she's got the course and distance form from last year. The Coral Cup, shown by Black Tears last year, is not a bad way into the Mayor's Hurdle division. She won that by 10 lengths. She ran super at Leopardstown, and she also is being worked back with March in mind. So she's constantly getting a little bit better. She ran okay in the International Hurdle. She ran really well there the other day. I think she's just got a very good chance, and she's 14, 16 to 1. I'd prefer to be backing her at that price than Tell Me Something Girl at 6 to 1.
I wouldn't. I'm going to stick with Tell Me Something Girl. Thank you very much, though. Fury Road then won the 3-mile Grade 1 novice chase, beating Run Wild Fred. And he's now 7 to 1 for the National Hunt Chase. And I think he's about 10 to 1 for the Festival Novices Chase to take on Galopin Des Champs. And for me, in the unlikely circumstance that they might bypass Cheltenham altogether with Run Wild Fred, I don't see any way that he's going to run the National Hunt Chase. That being said, I would love him to do that, but he jumps brilliantly. He is a super jumper of a fence, and with the cheek pieces it seemed to work. He didn't raise his head when he got to the front, and he stuck to his task, which was good. What did you make of that race?
Well, Fury Road was very good. It didn't look much of a race. It didn't look one of the strongest Grade 1s going into it, and a fair few of them ran fairly averagely. I was happy enough with Freddie. Freddie ran a great race. He almost fell down the back. But other than that, he's a super jumper. It was an odd mistake he made. He would be tailor-made for the National Hunt Chase if they decide to go down that route. I don't know whether they will or not. Fury Road, I think the most likely destination is the 3-mile novice chase, and I think he'll come up short in that. But he's a good horse. He kind of put it all together. He's been a bit of a horse that has been close to putting it together before, but it's never quite happened. And he finally kind of did put it together and put in a good performance. So if he can back that up, it'll be interesting. But I'd have thought Galopin Des Champs, if he'd run the following day, if he'd gone straight into that Grade 1 and had run as well as he did in the beginners, I suspect he would have won the race, and probably won the race pretty handy.
Quick word on Sharjah.
Sharjah was good. Sanahir was better. The strong run, 2 miles. I still think he's got an outside chance of nicking into the frame in a Champion Hurdle. Sharjah will probably come second in the Champion Hurdle again. Thought it was same old, really. And
then another Grade 1, this time a 2.5-mile novice hurdle at Newbury, won by stage star for Paul Nicholls, followed the route of Brave Man's Game. What did you make of his run, and do you think that he could be in the Ballymore picture?
It was an interesting race. Look, the winner did it very nicely. Obviously, it's been a tried and tested route for those connections to try and win the Chellow Hurdle, and he found plenty. Which was very good. The Skelton horse ran very nicely in second. West Balboa, don't know what you'd end up doing with her, and I just don't know what on earth they were doing with Gringo Dobrel. I just feel they're caught between two stools now. He was a horse I've had earmarked for maybe a festival handicap. That still might be the case. He's finished around 10-12 lengths off Stage Star. Would he nick into a Martin Pipe of 140 something? Maybe. I think he'd have a bloody good chance if he did get Jordan Gainford on him or something like that. No, the winner was good. You'd have to think he'll end up coming up short in a Ballymore. If the shallow has taught us anything over the last number of years, that's usually what it tells us.
Spot on. Now, we were going to go into some of the handicap finds, but I've decided, as we're recording this, we're not going to, because we put a tweet out earlier over on my Twitter page about the festival handicaps video, maybe an early video, because today we had William Hill pricing up those handicaps, all 28 races of the Cheltenham Festival, and I do think it'd be worthwhile to keep it all for one special video, and that's going to be the next video on Let's Talk Racing. I don't think the racing is spectacular next weekend, so we're going to bin that one off, and we're going to solely focus on what we've learned so far in those handicaps, try and get a grip on them, because I know plenty at the moment are struggling to do just that. We will try our very best to do so, and there's plenty of horses running over the Christmas period that could feature in that video. We're going to go in depth on some of the big handicaps, the Potemps qualifier, which horses have qualified, which horses can run well, and I do think that could make for a good viewing. So stick around for next week, and I do hope you will enjoy that. But quickly before we go, on New Year's Day we do have Cheltenham, and we are going to provide a nap. Do you have one, Andrew Blowhite?
Yeah, well, I've got a nap and next best for you, Josh. A bit of a Brucey bonus. One of them being today, as you're watching this video, if you're watching it on Friday, which is Ragnar Lodbrok. I know I put him up a couple of weeks ago as actually my nap of a weekend, and he ended up being a non-runner. He's running the handicap chase today. It punches down at 12.15, and one on Saturday, if you've missed that, to 12.55. It's a handicap hurdle, pretty average race. Horse called Jasek for Tony Martin. I actually have a slightly funny story. I ended up almost in Tony Martin's arms after Good Time Johnny won at the Leopardstown Christmas Festival there a couple of days ago. So his horses are in decent enough nick. I think Jasek will run a very good race.
And my nap for Cheltenham New Year's period would be Iron Maximus in the first race. I think he's about 6-4. He's a horse I like very much. I do think the Step Up and Trip will be right up his street, and I think he'll take the world of beating. And then Guide Your Dreams would be my next best. Brewing Up a Storm, he's never really clicked around Cheltenham. McFabulous has had a setback. I actually think that he fractured some vertebrae, or cracked some vertebrae early on the season, which is why we haven't seen him when schooling over fences. I think he'd take a fall at home as well. Not ideal preparation. Paul Nicholls has said he's going to come on for the run, so it's between Stormy Island and Guide Your Dreams. Guide Your Dreams been to Cheltenham twice this season. He's won twice this season. No reason to oppose him. I think he'll win the Relkill Hurdle. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and we'll see you next week for a Cheltenham Festival early handicaps view.